What happens when science fiction becomes reality? For decades, Hollywood has shown us stories and movies of alien visitors, secret government cover-ups, and programs. But in recent years, especially this year, which we'll get into, discussions about unidentified aerial phenomena, which many of us still call UFOs, have taken center stage and moved from late-night radio shows and conspiracy forums into congressional hearings, military reports, and released documents. Today, we're calling this episode Disclosure Day. And for good reason. We just had Steven Spielberg's new movie Disclosure Day open in theaters, and we're in the middle of release documents on UFOs, and tonight, we'll explore and discuss all of this and ask a simple question. Are we watching fiction slowly become fact? Hello and welcome back to Midwest Shadow Files. I'm Dan, your host and Midwest Shadow Files storyteller. What a year it's been for some popular sci-fi movies. We can dive into a whole host of them, but just skimming the surface, we have Project Hail Mary, Andy Weir's novel set to film, a story of a last-ditch effort to try and save the Earth with a space mission, and of course, a mission which makes alien contact. And then as of late, we have the latest movie by Steven Spielberg, Disclosure Day, where we get into a new age of government conspiracy that is a little different from some of his age-old sci-fi movies, where the storyline is less about making alien contact and the fact that they are already here. And asking the question, how long has the government known about this and covered it up? Let's rewind the clock here, talk about some movie stuff, and then we'll dive into the heart of the matter. We are not a movie review podcast. I just want to make that clear. So don't miss the point of the overall thoughts in this podcast tonight. I don't care if there was a certain scene and a certain actor or actress who botched the line, or if there was a certain part of the movie that seemed completely ridiculous and unrealistic, because there were a couple. Don't miss the point here. It's the subject matter that really intrigues me the most. So with that, rewinding the clock. In 1977, Spielberg released Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. But to jar your memory just a little bit, it's the movie that took place out by Devil's Tower. The storyline follows ordinary people who experience unexplained sightings and become obsessed with finding answers. And the thing is, it's really not about the aliens. What makes it original is that it's about the government response. Throughout that movie in the 70s, we have government officials hiding information from the public while still preparing for a historical encounter. Does that sound familiar? The whole thing is this government conspiracy where authorities know more than they want to admit. And while this is going on, of course, we have regular people like you and me witnessing strange stuff. A story is reported, witnesses share what they saw, and the military comes in and investigates. Scientists get involved, and pretty soon there's this controlled silencing, and of course the public isn't told everything. Well, very little anyway. And in some cases, things are swept completely under the rug. Okay, now, speed up today. 50 years later, and some observers are arguing that we are seeing something very similar. For most of the 20th century, the official response to UFOs were mostly dismissed. Do you remember the episode that we did a few weeks ago, the Gorman dogfight that took place in Fargo, North Dakota? If you haven't listened to that episode, I urge you go back and listen, especially if you haven't heard the story. It's the dogfight that took place in the skies above Fargo in 1948 between a trained World War II pilot and something that Gorman would describe as his aircraft that he had never seen before, something very strange, and a UFO that was not supposed to be in the area, and yet it was making maneuvers that he had never seen before. Think about that just for a moment. A trained fighter pilot, and for 28 minutes, Gorman went all out in a dogfight with this strange flying object, something that the military later dismissed as a weather balloon. But that never changed anything, and today we have military pilots speaking publicly about it, gun camera footage, government agencies now acknowledging investigations into unexplained aerial objects, and congressional hearings. To add more interesting details to the story, former intelligence officials making extraordinary claims, and now the question is no longer, are people seeing unexplained things? The question now is, what are they? Okay, speed up now to June 2026, the release of Spielberg's newest film, Disclosure Day. He seems to return to the original story of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, a subject that has clearly fascinated him. But Disclosure Day's storyline centers around government secrecy, hidden extraterrestrial evidence, whistleblowers, and all-out race to reveal this information to the public before the government agency stops it and buries it. Yesterday's message was contact. Today's message is disclosure. Now, is there anyone out there besides me that finds the timing of this movie bizarre? We have this real disclosure happening right now. And a few weeks later, boom, Disclosure Day, the movie is released. Now, Spielberg's film arrives at a moment when all these discussions are now becoming part of the mainstream public debate. And this question emerges. What if the greatest secret in human history wasn't whether or not aliens exist, that they are already here and the government knows about it? More right after this. Dan here, just a quick follow-up. We interrupted our flow this week with some stories already recorded and coming up around the corner. As promised, we'll get to those next week. Those are the Missouri River Monster, or better known as the infamous Minnewashi from North Dakota. And then we're going to travel down to the road in St. Louis, Missouri, or right outside of St. Louis, and cover a haunting that has occurred there for years, and that's on a trail, better known as, in folklore, as Zombie Road. We'll get into both of those stories next week, but before this week is out, since we are on this whole discussion on aliens and UFOs, we're going to continue on Wednesday with a little forgotten story in Council Bluffs, Iowa, where they had a UFO encounter back in 1977. And we're going to get into that story surrounding that one. It's very mysterious, and I hope you get a chance to come along for the ride on that one. That leaves me with just one last thing. I want to always remind my listeners that we are always interested in what you have to say. You can always drop a comment. You can always reach us at midwestshadowfiles@gmail.com. That's midwestshadowfiles@gmail.com. And of course, any story that you would like to share, any topic you want to discuss, and of course, anything that you would like to add about any episode. We look at ourselves more than just a podcast, but a community. But for now, let's get back to the story. So the question is, who already knows? Clearly the government. Let's look at a set of files and videos that the Pentagon declassified and released in May. Actually, on 3 different occasions, these files have been released now, but I just want to mention a few of the stories in some of these releases. Number 1, there was an incident that is being called the Potato. There was an FBI report detailing an event near Colorado Springs in 2022 where a potato-shaped object was in the sky, and more of the same type reports coming out of the Northeast, where apparently witnesses reported a bright light hovering over ponds. Now, my initial reaction was it a drone? More on drones here in a second, because that's a big question for a lot of these. Number 2, among the files released were numerous CIA and Air Force documents from the 40s and 50s, and I find that fascinating, especially when you go back to the Gorman case, which happened in 1948. But one of these reports was intriguing. There was a CIA report that kind of sped up into the 2008 from Zimbabwe. And this grabbed my attention because apparently the government was investigating these for years, from the 40s, but even more so in 2008 example, more recent within the last 20 years, and it was international. So far beyond the scope of just the United States. And third, These files contain many reports of infrared dashboard videos from vehicles literally tracking flying objects. And it wasn't just that they were flying. They were making maneuvers that wouldn't make sense for a drone. For example, in another international case in Greece, there was a sighting in 2023 where they caught a flying object making a sharp 90-degree turn in which they felt was around the speed of 80 miles per hour. According to the BBC, back to the 1940-1950 file released, even more specific was a time frame between 1948 and 1950 where there was a 116-page document from the armed forces reporting witnesses recounting over 209 sightings, completely unidentified, stating them as orbs and other objects. There were reports out of Iraq, Syria, Greece, both the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. One encounter, the witness reported seeing a triangular and metallic UAP flying at least 25,000 feet over the Mediterranean. Then there was a flying disc that was recovered near Roswell, Mexico. Of course, it had to be Roswell, right? The disc was a hexagonal shape suspended from a ball and was about 20 feet in diameter. And then there was a commercial air crew who reported seeing a strange object at 41,000 feet, and what they saw was uncanny. It was this bright light approaching them at a high speed as they watched the UFO. It did circles and corkscrews, made sharp 90-degree turns at high Gs. The explanation at the time was a meteor entering the atmosphere. But the crew was adamant that they had witnessed many falling stars before, and this was nothing like it. And it wasn't just sightings from the Earth. NASA astronauts during both the Apollo 12 and Apollo 17 missions captured different phenomena occurring taken from the surface of the moon. Very interesting stuff. So as a listener, what do you think? I'd love to hear your opinions on this or stories. Go ahead, drop comments below. We can always go more into this further down the road, but I would be interested to hear your thoughts or your theories. This reminds me a bit of a different story entirely. One that we will have to get into on a different episode by itself, and even though it's not based in the Midwest, it is a big enough Shadow File story to share. Have you heard of the Mothman? Surely you have. I'd have to say it's probably one of the bigger cryptid stories out there, you know, with Bigfoot, Beast of Bray Road, Dogman, and ta-da, Mothman. Now, Mothman is a story that comes out of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. A flying winged humanoid creature with glowing red eyes, and the stories of this are chilling. It's a really weird story. One worth diving into for sure, but tied to the story of the Mothman is another story completely. An alien encounter. And the weird connection, this alien encounter happened in Point Pleasant, West Virginia as well, just weeks before the Mothman sightings. This alien encounter is known as the Grinning Man, or the legend of Indrid Cold. Indrid Cold. Now, let that name stick in your mind for just a minute, because we're going to tell you a story, and then we're going to circle back, get more into Disclosure Day. It's a bizarre story, and you don't want to miss it. This is a story of Woodrow Derenberger. And the night he met a grinning man by the name of Indrid Cold. It was 1966, and a sewing machine salesman named Woody Derenberger was driving home after a long day on the road. He was driving along Route 77 near the town of Mineral Wells, West Virginia, when suddenly this vehicle passed him going super fast. As it raced past him, he couldn't figure out why the car was going so fast on 77. He thought he could get in an accident. It was almost like something had scared him or was chasing him. When all of a sudden, Woody looked in his rear view mirror and understood what the car was trying to get away from. Behind him was a strange charcoal-colored vehicle, almost like a large searchlight, hovering and closing in on his car. He began to slow his car, curious on what the object was, and as he stopped his car, the craft hovered over him, levitated, and then a tall man emerged from it. He was wearing a shimmering metallic blue suit, which was strange enough. But the true oddity of this was as the man walked towards him, he began to speak to him to open the window, to not be afraid. We mean you no harm. We wish you happiness. And all the while, as the man was speaking, his mouth never moved. He only held the same large, eerie grin with his arms crossed the entire time. And the strangest part of this recollection, he hadn't rolled down the windows yet. Woody claimed that the man was speaking to him telepathically, mind to mind. When Woody asked the man who he was, the man simply answered that he was Indrid Cold. He was a searcher from a peaceful jungle-like planet called Lanolus, located in the galaxy of Ganymedes. Now, I share this story as a short piece just to highlight strange alien encounters. Some say the story is totally made up, that Derenberger had lost his mind, but this story, along with another story that made some of the same claims of strange characters, an alien figure like a man had interacted with them, wanting to know more about them. And with all this strange encounters, including the Mothman figure that comes to haunt the area a few weeks later, this brings a famous reporter and author to investigate in the area named John Keel. Now, who is John Keel? He wrote the book, The Mothman Prophecies. And it's an excellent book. I suggest reading it. And if you haven't read the book, you can also check out the movie starring Richard Gere, The Mothman Prophecies. All of this comes to light in the book, the connection between this character named Indrid Cold and the Mothman, but there is something eerie that happens during the reporting. These cases where people began to experience this strange grinning man would have a visitor come to see them soon after. Witnesses to these events would begin to get a strange phone call in the middle of the night, encounters with men in black, telling them to forget they ever had these sightings, forget they had ever had conversations, tell nobody. Now, just a little side note. The term Men in Black, or MIB for short, just like the movie with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, was first penned by John Keel. So this whole government conspiracy to hide the truth, keep things in secrecy, was not a new concept. And the Men in Black theory was well documented even before the Mothman prophecies. Okay, now, bear with me just for a minute, because all these points that I'm making, everything we're talking about is going to point right back to Disclosure Day. So we're going to go right back in. The Men in Black theory, where you have these mysterious men dressed in black, would almost always seemingly show up after these strange encounters. Days before the famous UFO Roswell crash, there was a man named Harold Dahl. He claimed to have saw a donut-shaped UFO off the coast of Washington. Guess what? The next day, Dahl is approached by this strange man in a black suit, driving a brand new Buick. He takes Dahl out to eat and begins to tell him accurately everything he had witnessed the day before, then finishes by threatening him to never speak of it again. So we have this government conspiracy thing going on with all of this. Or do we? Because John Keel from the Mothman Prophecies had a totally different theory that the Men in Black, these possibly secret government agents trying to hide the truth, weren't even human. They were what he would call ultra-terrestrials, meaning they were not visitors from outer space, and they were certainly not government agents. They were from a parallel dimension, and they could manipulate energy into physical objects, creatures, or even people. In fact, he tracked a few of these Men in Black characters, and he wrote how they didn't even act human. They had an olive complexion. They were really jerky with their movements. They didn't know how to use common, ordinary earth objects like a fork, or a pen, or a pencil, or drinking out of a glass was just unusual for them. And they could manipulate phone lines, mimic voices, and project false memories. And he viewed them as tricksters who would stage UFO crashes, leave false evidence. They wore black suits to mock human authorities who would wear something similar, and they would do this to throw off researchers, to get them into chasing false leads. And right there, that is a lot to unpackage. So, Men in Black, Mothman, Indrid Cold, alien encounters, on and on and on. What does this have to do with with Disclosure Day. Let's dive into it right after this. Hey there, Dan here. I just wanted to take a moment before we're going on with this episode to give a big thank you to everyone listening. No matter where you are listening, whether Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or a whole host of other platforms that we're on. We bring the stories and discussions because, well, for one, I love telling them, but even bigger is a community of listeners like yourself. We have a whole host of ideas where we can go into dark history, lore, well, anything Shadowfile-like, but we don't claim to know everything. In fact, we know we don't know everything, and that's where you can come in as a listener if you have any ideas. We'd love to hear them. That includes just writing in to say, hey, how's it going? We love that as well. It wasn't that long ago where we had a Bigfoot enthusiast reach out to us, and it was probably over some of our very first episodes we did when once upon a time we were Iowa Shadowfiles, and we were covering a couple Bigfoot stories from the state, and he shared another Bigfoot encounter in Missouri and a few other places, and he wanted to know if we had other Bigfoot stories. And here's the thing. Yes, we have a lot of Bigfoot stories. In fact, Bigfoot is probably one of the biggest cryptid stories on the planet, so we'll definitely dive more into Bigfoot or Sasquatch, to use the technical term. But we also want to be true to the overall story of the podcast, which means diving into much more, so to include other cryptids, ghosts, and paranormal, and of course aliens and UFOs, like we are on today's episode. So stay tuned. Around the corner, we do have more Sasquatch tales. But I wanted to just give a big thank you for Anonymous reaching out and suggesting that. For the rest, just a word that you can always reach out to us at our email at midwestshadowfiles@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again. And for now, let's get back to the story. We digressed a little bit talking about Ingrid Cold and the other cases, but like I said earlier, there is a correlation in all of this regarding the movie on Disclosure Day. Again, I'll say it again. I just thought the timing was really, really weird. It's almost like Spielberg had a crystal ball or something, or did he know something? Just makes me wonder. My guess is that he just really probably is into the topic. He's very well read, and he got lucky with the timing. And of course, we can always agree to disagree with that. Just my initial thought on it. So that brings us back to the movie. Could a genuine disclosure even happen today? What I mean by this is it seems that we are in a society that is open to information spreading at lightning speed, basically due to social media and the internet. If a true disclosure was brought to us today, would it ultimately get lost in an ocean of misinformation? Let's face it, even today, we can't even agree on what recent UAP revelations even mean. Some see it as just an advancement of technology. It's not alien. It's just China's way of beating us and going way ahead of us with technology. Others, along the same lines, see it as a foreign surveillance technology. I have to admit, when all the weird drone activity was happening on the East Coast earlier this year, that's exactly what I thought it was. I thought it was some foreign technology trying to maybe spy or whatever they were doing. But some believe that evidence does truly point to something non-human in intelligence. And this overall debate has really become the big part of the story. Let's look at Spielberg and some of his work. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T., War of the Worlds. Each one of these display a totally different emotion, whether it's a sense of wonder in Close Encounters, or empathy with E.T., and of course, fear with War of the Worlds. And then you get Disclosure Day, basically leaving the viewer with a sense of needing answers. What aren't we being told? And that's where this whole question of the Men in Black Ingrid Cold case in the Mothman comes into play. If we were to get the truth, a full disclosure, what would our reactions be? Can we handle the truth? Disclosure Day shows this scene. And I don't want to go too far so I don't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. But when it's revealed about aliens being on Earth, the initial reaction from the news anchor breaking the story, this is kind of towards the end of the movie, It's one of sadness, it's dread. She is deeply troubled by this disclosure. And wouldn't that be the world's reaction in some cases? It makes me wonder. Would it spin the world into chaos? And then we have the religious angle. Now, I'm going to hit on this lightly, but by all means, as a listener, feel free to interject with a comment below or an email. But in one of these scenes, the religious angle comes up. If it's true, and aliens are here, would it cause people to abandon their religious faith? Would they question it? Everything they believe in would be put into confusion. And this notion of peace, believing in a higher power, would it rattle someone so much that they turn their back on the very thing they believed in from the very beginning? And just a side note here, this is where I heard arguments from the church that perhaps aliens aren't aliens at all. Perhaps they're demons. What's your thoughts on that? Again, just posing a question. Love to hear anything you'd like to say on that one. By the way, side note before I go into my final thoughts on Disclosure Day, the story takes place in Kansas City, Missouri, which I found highly coincidental considering that we are Midwest Shadow Files, so naturally a storyline happening in Kansas City has to be on this podcast, right? So anyways, final thoughts. And I'm giving a spoiler alert on this one. Just a heads up on that. I'm going to give it away the ending with the next few words and thoughts. So if you haven't seen it yet and you want to wait to come back to this, go ahead, pause this episode for now. But if you have seen it, or don't mind a little spoiler to the ending and you're not intending to see it and you don't care, you just want to hear this, let's look at the closing of the movie. Let's look at the final scene. The movie is called Disclosure Day, and yet we, the audience, watching for 2.5 hour movie for some kind of answer. That's what we're here for. What are you disclosing? What's the answer here? We want some kind of conclusion to the movie. And here's the thing. We never get one. No, instead, we get Emily Blunt, who is the main actress, looking directly at us through the movie screen almost, like she's speaking directly to us, and we're told one final word. And if you've seen it, do you remember that? Listen. And this is the big thought provoker. Maybe it's a message to all humanity that we're not ready because we're not listening. Maybe we talk too much. Maybe I talk too much on this podcast, eh? Maybe we argue all the time. Maybe we spend too much time just consuming information. And after decades of asking the same question over and over again, are we alone? We're given a challenge instead of an answer. Not look, not believe, not fear, not feel or talk. We are given just one word. Listen. Maybe this whole disclosure thing isn't about someone telling us the truth. Maybe it's about when we are finally willing to just be still for just a moment and hear it. To truly just stop talking for one moment, drown out all the noise, and listen. Maybe this whole thing of getting sidetracked by tricksters, men in black, government agencies, pranksters, liars, is that we aren't truly opening our eyes, ears, and minds to the distinct possibilities. And in a universe as deep and wide and vast as our own, there seems to be high possibilities. We definitely don't have all the answers, but we do have the ability to hear others, respect them, agree to disagree, and listen. And that is Disclosure Day for me. This episode has been written, recorded, and produced by me, myself, and I. I'm Dan, your host and Midwest Shadow Files storyteller. And this is Midwest Shadow Files.